Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Walking with Warriors podcast, brought to you by Vertex Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, where we take a look at the sickle cell disease caregiver experience through our eyes. I'm Elle.
I'm Patrice. And today we're sharing our take on the power of advocacy and how community-based organizations can help support caregivers.
Please note that the views expressed are those of the host or guest and are not necessarily shared by Vertex. All participants have been compensated by Vertex. This podcast is only intended for U.S. audiences and for educational purposes. It is not intended to replace discussions with your healthcare provider.
Remember, everyone's experience with sickle cell disease, or SCD, is different, so it's important to talk to a doctor before making any changes to your routine.
So, Elle, our advocacy journeys have been very, very different, I think. However, there are some things that have been kind of the same. And one thing that you and I talked about recently was when we were first starting out, just reaching out just for some support, just for community, not even to be a part of a specific group, but just for community. It was a little difficult for me. I reached out several times, did not have the response that I was looking for. Often I called, there was no response. I sent an email through Contact Us, no response, crickets. So tell me about your experience with that.
It was very similar. I reached out and I didn't hear anything. So I just figured, I would try again in different ways, and I didn't hear anything. And to be very honest with you, some years passed.
Yes.
Between the first initial times when I tried to connect with different groups. But I then just kept reaching out to other groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Someone reached out to me and they wanted to interview me and have a conversation about advocacy. And they had heard a little bit about my story and how I advocated on behalf of my son very strongly for some things we were trying to get done for him. And once I had that conversation, then there were some introductions made through that, and then more connections, and it just kind of grew from there.
I started going on to social media and I found different groups who told me about, support groups that were meeting virtually. So I was able to find groups from social media. And so now social media has really just kind of opened up the world and given all of these different organizations a platform to talk about these experiences that really didn't exist before.
Finding that organization, that one organization, not only did it take time, but once I found them, like you, everything just really came alive. Everything. Like, I remember attending like a conference, like one of the conferences for the first time for sickle cell disease. It was the most exhilarating experiences I'd had in years where sickle cell was concerned.
Yes.
Because it can be so heavy when you get the diagnosis, as you're going through different treatments, as you're having these hospitalizations, doctor's appointments, just everything. It can be very heavy and it can be overwhelming. And when you get that organization that really works for you, oh my gosh, it really takes you to a different level. You feel like you have support. You feel like there's family, there's community. It's wonderful.
One of the things that really stands out to me about different advocacy groups is the role they play in helping kids understand themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about, raising your son and starting young, starting in the home. But, there's a proverb that says it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
And these community-based organizations are that village.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about their impact on the community, often it's getting those young people who are diagnosed, giving them a sense of normalcy, that there are other
Yes.
people just like them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's really powerful about its role on the family,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you a place where you can connect with other families and really see them on a local level.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think the importance, you begin to see the importance at home first with your warrior, right? Because
Right.
your advocacy really, I think, shows them what they can do and how they can self-advocate. And we started very young with our warrior, um, just really encouraging him to speak up for himself and really um, helping him craft his story in a way that can be heard. And before you know it, I had folks, um, really nurses, coming and saying, "Hey, can you talk to this family? Can you talk to this family?" And so that's kind of how it grew.
You said it feels like you have family. And I think to me, that's the most important part of having a community-based organization. You no longer feel isolated in the
Yes,
experience.
yes, yes.
So there's a lot of times when you have a chronic illness or a diagnosis that you feel like you're going through those experiences alone. But once you go to a conference, it's like before I even say a word, other people in the room can match that energy. They know what
Absolutely.
I'm feeling on the inside. They know that, if it was hard getting out of bed to get up and do, they know that experience before I even speak it.
I think for me, I had the words. I didn't have the courage. And so often I didn't want to talk about it. Sometimes you feel a little timid about explaining it. And going to those conferences, meeting people of like mind, meeting people of like circumstances gave me the courage to say, "Hey, it's all good. This is what's happening in our lives. This is how we're dealing with it. This is what you'll have to deal with or not." And just be very, very clear about it, very plain about it, and unapologetic. And that's what it gave me.
Once I was connected with a group, it opened a new world of
Oh,
experiences for
yes.
me that has made all the difference in my journey. And so for people in the community who hear us talking about advocacy, sometimes they don't necessarily see themselves as an advocate because
Mhm.
that just sounds like a big, sophisticated term. But really, for us, I would say it's speaking up, is being honest about our experiences, and it's making sure that we have some control over this experience.
Mhm.
When my child was born, I didn't really have control over the diagnosis and the things that were taking place, but I did have control on how I shared the message with others
Yes.
so that they would be aware of what sickle cell is.
So life is going to throw those curveballs. And as a caregiver, we have to understand that we have to pivot, we have to be flexible, and we have to show ourselves some grace.
Yes.
And I think that comes from talking to other caregivers. That comes from understanding other caregivers' situations. I think all of that comes out of that community. All of that comes out of that connection. And I think I just said it, but I think it's worth saying again, showing yourself some grace
Yes.
is huge, huge. And as a caregiver, that should be number one.
One thing about sickle cell disease, I think initially you think about what is taken away from you. But when you connect with these organizations, you then can change the perspective and understand what is given to you or what your child can achieve. And I think for me, seeing warriors become doctors and lawyers and artists and, like really anything.
Yes.
They're entrepreneurs, just amazing people with all of these gifts and talents. I then thought about what my child now has access to.
Yes.
This incredible community of people who have achieved great things in spite of. And I think that's powerful. And the ability to overcome, I don't see that as out of reach, is now within reach because I see it from so many different warriors every time I'm able to connect with the community. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. If you liked this episode and want us to keep making more, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can listen to or watch the Walking with Warriors podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and walkingwithwarriors.com.
We'll be back with a full-length episode about how the outlook of SCD is changing and what that means for caregivers like us. See you next time.